Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Go Beyond. My name is Alyssa Robinson. I am here with our senior pastor, Daniel Humbert, and we are going to go through the Huddle Guide together. And if you are not familiar with the Huddle Guide, I'd like to direct you to the link that is either above me or below me, depending on where you are watching, or you can always find it at tmumc.org/stories. But we have some great huddle discussions for you to have at home with your family or with your friends, wherever you want to have these conversations. And so every Monday morning, Daniel and I walk the walk and answer these huddle questions for you live. So, are you ready?
Yeah, so I ought to just own every week when I prepare those questions, I like them better when I'm thinking about how other people are going to answer them rather than us.
Oh, yeah. He's like, oh, this will be great for them to talk about. And he forgets every week that we also have to talk about it. But I feel like the first question, it seems like a simple question, but it's also really big. And that is, how is Jesus important to your life?
Yeah. So I also reflect on the reason we started the Huddle Guide, which was to have, about a 5 to 8 minute conversation with team members before worship. And I'm thinking, I don't know that we could get that done because there's just two of us. And usually those huddles, have 8 or 10 or something like that. May have to rethink that.
So how is Jesus important to your life?
Oh, I have to answer that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Jesus, I think, is important. And let me just first state, I don't get this right all the time. And in fact, I get it wrong more than I get it right. But Jesus is important to me because of what he teaches and how I try to live into those teachings of, loving God with all my heart, loving others, loving my neighbor, um, loving people like I want to be loved. I think that's important because it changes who we are, or it helps us to be better people in terms of how we live. And I'm convinced, as I've said more than once, that if we as followers of Jesus were able to live his teachings better, then the world would just be a better place. It just would. And it's a big challenge for us. But that's why he's important in my life, because he helps set my compass, if you will, to help be guided in a proper way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. It's hard. Man, how is Jesus important in my life? Well, I grew up a Christian. I grew up in the church. The way that my parents have chosen to parent me is based on Jesus's teachings. The way their parents parented them is based on Jesus's teaching. The entire way that I interact with the world and understand the world is through the lens of Jesus's teaching, whether I choose it or not, because it is how I was raised and how I was raised to view the world. And so I do not know what kind of person I would be today. I would be a totally different person if I was raised without the teachings of Jesus. And I mean, as far as how he's shaping my life every single day, yes, I try really hard and fail all the time at trying to live into those teachings of loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, uh, putting others before yourself, humbling yourself, all the fruits of the spirit. Like, I try really hard, but I cannot imagine what my life would look like, because it's the way that I was raised, is to follow the ways of Jesus. And so I don't even know. It's hard for me to think of specific ways, because it feels like my entire being has been shaped by this one person who walked this earth 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And in many ways, that's good, right? That it's so ingrained that it just kind of is sort of second nature. And yet, I, like you, grew up in the church. And so there are times when I wonder, what would my life been like had I not made this faith claim, or if I hadn't been brought up with this belief in this guy named Jesus. And for me, over the years, it's been a progression from, and we talked about this the other day, this progression from it's good enough to simply believe in who this guy is, what he did, why he came. But to me, that's a beginning point, and it's migrated much more to how do I follow his teachings? How do I live into those teachings? And when I reflect on his statement to the disciples after the resurrection, as Matthew's gospel records it, about go make disciples, to be a follower of Jesus is much more than just believing in who the guy was. It's about doing the very things you just described, right? Living those principles and emulating his teachings. And that's the biggest challenge. It just is. There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways,
Well,
it's easy to say, I believe in Jesus. It's much harder to say, I do my best to follow his teachings every day.
yeah. Well, because then people will point it out when you don't get it right,
Some
which is
might, yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
So this week in worship, we were focused on, it was our last week of our worship series, New. And this week was focused on what do you need to start? And your challenge was, we always need to start with Jesus. Which I can't say I was surprised by that challenge, that in church, the message of starting something new was, well, first let's start with Jesus. But why? Why is it important to start with Jesus?
Yeah, so I don't doubt there were many of you out in the congregation land on the internet or in the room, but my hunch is there were a lot of people who were kind of expecting me to say something else, whatever that was, start with the Bible or start with love or start with whatever. My hunch is there were a few folks who were like, start with Jesus? What do you mean? And I believe it's important to start with Jesus for the very reasons we just talked about. I think if we start with anything else, whatever that is, whether it's self-improvement or whether it's trying to be a better person or a nicer person or more kind, if we start anywhere other than with Jesus, I think we're starting in the wrong place. Now, I'm biased, right? I mean, I'm a Christian pastor, and so I believe certain things and have certain principles, and therefore I'm going to start with Jesus. But I just think if we can start with his teachings, I'm just convinced the world would be a better place, and therefore I'd be a better person. And so that's why I believe it's important to start with Jesus.
Well, follow-up question to that. When we say start with Jesus, that could mean so many different things. Jesus had so many teachings, and to say start with Jesus is taking his entire history as we know it and saying start with that. But even that feels overwhelming. So what within the message of Jesus or how we follow Jesus, what within that do we start with?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to start. One is to just read one of the Gospels, and I would just say pick one of them. Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, any of them work. Mark is the shortest, and so if that's helpful to you, read Mark's Gospel. It's just 16 chapters. It can be read quite easily in a couple of days, or you could take a chapter a day. Start with Jesus and the Gospels are a great place to start. Now, if you know a little bit about Jesus already, for instance, you've been a Christian for a while or whatever, then what you might do is just hone it down to what did Jesus tell us? What are the greatest commandments? And they are to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Start there. Start loving God with everything you've got. And listen, there's a wide range of ways to render that, but give your whole self to God. And then also give yourself to loving your neighbor just the way you love yourself. And both of those are sort of not in our natural inclination as human beings, because our natural inclination, I know mine, I can only assume yours, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. We're pretty selfish people, right? I mean, we're all about us. And so it's not our natural inclination. And so when I say start there, I would just say, start with his primary commandments: love, love God, love neighbor. And if you'd like to know more, read one of the Gospels.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question. What new wine will you pour into new wineskins? And maybe for those who are watching this and did not get the chance to watch your message yet from Sunday, explain why we're asking that question.
Yeah, because I'll pour a good Malbec any day, so that's a good new wine for me. But wineskins is Jesus's imagery for doing something new. And he used that metaphor to basically indicate that we've got to change the way we're doing stuff. And old wineskins are basically the things we've been doing, the way we've been living, the way we've been acting, the way we've been interfacing. So it's just a metaphor for we need something new, we need something different. And, the other thing that's in terms of modern rendering, new wine is not always the best, right? We like wine to age just a little bit, at least good wine that needs to age. So that part falls a little short, but I'll just go with Jesus, right? And so for me, the new wine in a new wineskin, I actually just made the first step today, and that's engaging the services of a spiritual director. I have done that before, and it's been a few years now, and spiritual direction is, simply put, at least, and these are my words, not any kind of definition, but simply put, spiritual direction for me is sort of spiritual care for the soul. And it's like a therapist for your spiritual soul. And so I've at least made the first move of contacting a spiritual director to help me re-engage spiritual practices and what's known as spiritual formation, because I'm getting dry and I need that help. And it's always helpful to have sort of this outside source that will kind of help guide me through some practices that will help rejuvenate and renew my faith. And so I'm looking forward to that. I hope I hear back fairly soon.
Yeah. Man, when I was looking at that question, I'll just be brutally honest. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea where to even start or what I need. I've also been feeling spiritually dry. Part of it is that by no fault of the churches, I love working here, but Sunday morning has become a time of work for me.
Yes.
And I have not worshiped with my faith community in almost a year.
Yep.
And so I'm feeling depleted. And I don't know where to start to, I don't know. I actually kind of hit that wall this weekend of like, I'm really feeling cabin fever and like, I just want things to go back. I want to go back in time. I'm just now getting to that point of, man, I was just sitting there on Sunday morning and thinking about how much I miss sitting in church with my friends on Sunday morning and grabbing a cup of coffee after church and talking. And it's a lack of spiritual connection, but also a lack of community that I've been missing. And it's just hard to know where to start to bring that back. So I can't, before I figure out what the new wine is, I have to figure out what the new wineskin is. And I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. Well, so we know that it's difficult when two introverts feel the same way, right? That we really need that, because there's a sense in which that's so true, even for introverts, that we need that human contact, human connection, human community. And you're right. It's you have felt what many a church worker feels, which is faith becomes work, and it should never feel that way. And yet it's the most dangerous component of working in the church. It just is.
Yeah. So I feel like 24 hours wasn't enough time for me to figure out my new wineskin. I'm going to keep thinking about that. And I am very hopeful that Lent will be a time for me to lean into that even more, because I'm trying. Part of my fasting that I'm trying for the first time this year, which I will talk about at a later time, is to incorporate meditation in a way that I've never done before. And I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also pretty intimidated by it. And so more to come on that, but I'm hoping that can be a pathway to a new wineskin for me.
I bet it will. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
But those are all the questions that we had today. Not too bad.
Good questions.
So I hope that y'all are asking these questions together at home, in your family group, with your friends, in your small group that you're meeting with over Zoom. Bring this huddle guide with you. Have these conversations. They're really good conversations. And we will see you again on Wednesday at 12:30 as we dig even deeper into the message from Sunday, because I get to ask my own questions.
Those are hard.
They are really hard. Y'all should join us and see how Daniel answers these questions, because I cooked up some good ones this week.